Good morning, everybody.
Morning, Bhante.
Good morning.
Morning, Bhante.
Yeah.
Good
Today,
morning.
I like to start this talk right away. Today's talk is on a discourse. We can find it in Samyutta Nikaya, volume Samyutta Nikaya, section 3. It's called Khanda Samyutta, Samyutta on the 5 aggregates. There was a man called Mahali. Buddha was living in Savatthi, and this Mahali went to see the Buddha and asked him and paid respect to the Buddha and sat on one side and said to him, Venerable Sir, Purana Kassapa. Purana Kassapa is an naked ascetic. And he said, this Purana Kassapa tells us that there is no cause or reason for people to afflict pain or suffering. No cause for defiling the mind. The suffering or the defilement of the mind arise fortuitously. That means without any cause, just it happened automatically. And then, so he asked the Buddha, is it true that pain and pleasure arise without any cause or condition? Then Buddha said to him, Mahali, that is not true, that causes and conditions arise without any cause. If this form were exclusively suffering, immersed in suffering, steeped in suffering, and if it were not also steeped in pleasure, living beings would not become filled with feeling of love for the form. That is physical form. If the physical form were exclusively suffering and immersed in suffering, steeped in suffering, and if it were not steeped in pleasure, being would not be filled with feeling of love for this form, this body. But because form is pleasurable, immersed in pleasure, steeped in pleasure, and not steeped in suffering, being becomes very much attached and be filled with love for the form. And by being immersed, being filled with the feeling of love for the body, they are captivated by it, and being captivated by it, they are filled. They are defiled. They said that this Mahali is a cause and condition for defilement of beings. It is thus that beings are defiled with cause and conditions. This is very important statement. Buddha gave very beautiful statement. That is, if the body is exclusively pleasant, pleasurable, then the people would not become disenchanted or disappointed with the body. And if it is pleasurable, and they always remain in pleasure. And this is not happening. If it is always full of pleasure, and people are always in pleasure, and they will remain in pleasure all the time. And they will be filled with pleasure because they are captivated by pleasure. And this is the cause and conditions for defilement. It is thus that the mind will be defiled. On the other hand, if Mahali, this feeling were, if the body always filled with pain and suffering, they will not enjoy this life. They always remain in pleasure. So, if the form is always in suffering and people are immersed in suffering and being merged in suffering, the people will never become attached to the body. And they will never experience any pleasure. And they will never become attached to pleasure. Since the form has pleasure, they are enjoy pleasure. So this is not always painful, neither is it always have pleasure. And this is therefore are the causes for pleasure and pain. It doesn't happen automatically. It happens with causes and conditions. You may remember the Buddha's argument very clearly. If the form were exclusively suffering, immersed in suffering, steeped in suffering, uh, then, and if it were not uh, steeped in pleasure, beings would not become filled with uh, feeling of love for it, because it is always suffering. But because form is pleasurable, immersed in pleasure, steeped in pleasure, and is not steeped only in suffering, beings become enormous or be filled with feeling of love with it. By being uh, filled with the feeling of love with it, with the form, they are captivated by it, and by being captivated, they are defiled. So the Nathaputra, Nathaputra's argument, Purna's argument was that the pleasure and pain arises without any causes and conditions. Purnakasapa's argument. Buddha said no, pleasure and pain arises because of these two reasons. The form is, when we see a form, it is beautiful, so we have desire. And the cause of desire is the appearance of the pleasantness of the body. And it always doesn't give pleasure because it has pain as well. And therefore, these are the causes. So Buddha said there is a cause for being, and similarly, the feelings, if the feeling also exclusively is pleasant, and then people will not have pain. Or if it is exclusively painful, people will not have pleasure. Similarly, the perception, volitional formations, and consciousness, if they were exclusively pleasurable, they never have pain or suffering. If they were exclusively painful or suffering, they will never have pleasure. So, therefore, Buddha said, Mahali, this is the cause and conditions for defiling of being, and thus is the defilement and conditions of being. When this was said, Mahali could not understand it properly, clearly. Then he asked Venerable, say, what is the cause and conditions for purification of beings? How is it that beings are purified with the cause and conditions? Then he said, Mahali, if this form were exclusively pleasurable, immersed in pleasure, steeped in pleasure, and if it were not also steeped in suffering, being would not experience revulsion towards it. That is the important thing. How this pleasantness, unpleasantness arises, and how beings become disenchanted with this body. If the body is exclusively pleasurable and does not have pain, then beings would not experience revulsion, dispassion. But because form is suffering, immersed in suffering, steeped in suffering, and is not steeped in only in love or in pleasure, beings experience revulsion towards the body. Experiencing your revulsion, they become dispassionate, and through dispassion, they are purified. This is very powerful statement. If it is always pleasant, nobody be will have any revulsion or dislike. If it is always beautiful, since it is not so, they become detached and dispassionate towards uh, the body. And so being dispassionate, experiencing revulsion, they become dispassionate. Through dispassion, they are purified. How dispassion makes a mind pure, purified? Because mind understands the true nature of this body. Purified and therefore purification does not happen automatically. It happens by seeing the body exactly as it is. When we see the body exactly as it is, that helps us to become detached from the body. Now, how the mind defiled? It is just the other way around. It is, the Buddha said, it is thus purified with the cause and conditions. It is liberated when one become disenchanted, dispassionate, one become detached, and detachment helps the person to liberate the mind from clinging, craving. And then the person liberated from craving can say destroyed is birth, the holy life has been lived, what had to be done has been done, there is nothing more to be done. Now, this is the statement that Buddha made in answering Mahali's questions. Now, let us expand this little bit and make it more clear. We have to learn to separate the 5 aggregates from 5 aggregates of clinging. We have 5 aggregates and we have 5 aggregates of clinging. In Pali, Pancha Khanda, Pancha Upadana Khanda. Panchakhanda is form, feeling, perception, thought, and volitional formations and consciousness. Pancha Upadana Khanda also are the same. The difference is we cling to form, then that is Rupa Upadana Khanda. Rupa or form subject to clinging, or form that we cling to. When we cling to the form, then the form becomes Rupa Upadana. Upadana Khanda. Khanda means collection of various things. Skanda, group. We call aggregates in English. So the form becomes form is aggregates of form is one thing, and aggregates of form subject to clinging is another. That means when we cling to it, it becomes the clinging aggregate. Clinging to form is clinging aggregate to form. Similarly, we have feelings, aggregates of feeling, all kind of feelings. And then that feeling is one thing, aggregate of clinging to, or subject to clinging, aggregate is another subject to. That means feeling aggregates of clinging, or feeling aggregates subject to clinging. Perception aggregate and perception aggregate or subject to clinging. Volition or sankhara aggregate and sankhara aggregates of clinging. And these sankhara aggregates, even the arahants have, Buddhas have. The only thing is that they don't cling to them. And then perception aggregate and perception of clinging aggregate. Consciousness aggregate, consciousness of clinging aggregate. So ordinary people, unenlightened persons, have the 5 aggregates of clinging, upadana kanda. And arahants have 5 aggregates, just 5 aggregates pure. If you were to say like pure mathematics and applied mathematics. So you have something very pure and clean. And you don't use it, just it is there. So how can we cling to aggregates? Here Buddha says, how we can aggregate to the form? We aggregate to the form because we think the form is something permanent. Something, this is called distorted perception. Anicca nicca sanya. Form is when it is beautiful, we think it is beautiful. But under the beauty, there is something happening. What is happening? Anicca, impermanence. Today I received an email from somebody who has read my last book called Impermanence in Plain English. The person wrote to me, I know the person for about almost 45 years. And the person said, Bhante, this is a wonderful thing. You told us the truth. I said to that person, I'm very happy to tell the truth and happier to hear somebody like to read impermanence and enjoy impermanence, or try to read something true and enjoy the truth. Enjoying the truth is very, very pleasant. So That is what arahants do. Ordinary people do not enjoy the change, impermanence. This is very unpalatable. And that is why they cling to it. Anicca nicca sanya, they have perception of permanence in impermanence. And they have the perception of asubhe subha sanya. As Buddha said in this discourse, the form is not superficially, it appears to be subha, pleasant, superficially. As soon as we remove our skin, very thin layer, it is so thin that when you remove it, you hardly can hold it because it is so thin. And yet, under this very thin layer, makes us think that it is pleasant, beautiful, subha. And as soon as we remove the very thin layer of skin, then you can see the blood, yellow stuff and white stuff, and then flesh and nerves and arteries and bones and blood oozing and so forth. You feel the yucky feeling. So where is that beauty? So Buddha said, when we see it in that way, we can become disenchanted, become dispassionate. That doesn't mean that we hate the body. We don't hate the body, but we see it exactly as it is. Then anicca nicca sanya, asubhe subha sanya, dukkhe sukha sanya. Dukkhe sukha sanya. This body is subject to afflictions. Afflictions. That is why it is called body, rupa. Rupa, five aggregates, rupa, vedana, sanya, sankhara, vijnana, form, feeling, perceptions, and so forth. Form is called rupa. Buddha asked monks, why do you call it rupa? It is called rupa, rupatit rupam. Rupa means subject to alter and change and subject to afflictions. Sitena rupati, kena rupati, sitena rupati, unnena rupati, jigacha rupati, pipasa rupati, and so forth. Vatena rupati, dansa makasa vata tapasi sampasena rupati. That means when it is cold, it alters. And the body, when it is cold, it shrinks. And we feel the shrinking. Blood also can become a little thicker. When it is warm, it pores expands, sweat is coming out, and then blood becomes thin and so forth. We feel that the rupana, the altering. Then wind blows. That also changes the body, skin. When we are hungry, when there is not enough food, the body exists because of the food. Ahara samadaya, rupa samadayo. Ahara nirodha, rupa nirodha. Ahara, when we have food, material food, kabalinkara food, then form is formed. That means form becomes healthy, strong, young looking, and so forth. When the food is reduced, there is no food, body shrinks and become weak, what do you call, skinny, and so forth. The rupa disappears, rupa, the form. Similarly, our feelings, uh, then these are three kind of distortions. Sukhe, dukkhe, what you call anicca, nicca sanya, dukkhe, sukha sanya, then asubhe, subha sanya, and then anatte, atta sanya. Anatte, atta sanya. Anatta, it really does not exist. Atta is something that exists. But we perceive, we think that there is something permanent. And soon we will realize that there is nothing to represent the word self, I. And then, seeing all this, one becomes disenchanted with the body. And I said, disenchantment is another insight, not something to make us hate the body. What is the insight? That as Maharahulovada Sutta, Mahatipadopama Sutta, and so forth explain, external parts of the body, external elements that made up of this body, and internal elements are the same, because this body is made up of elements, earth, water, air, fire, and so forth. And internal earth elements, external earth elements are both elements. Internal earth element has 20 parts, water elements 12 parts, fire elements 4 parts, air elements 6 parts, altogether 42 parts in the body. We generally talk about 32 parts of the body, but there are 42 parts of the body inside. And outside also, the 4 elements are made up of this, the same 4 elements that are made this body. And both outside external 4 elements don't have any self. And those selfless elements made this body. When the body is made up of selfless elements, how can there be for self in the body? Because it is made up of selfless elements. And therefore in the body also there is no self. When we see the similarity between internal elements and external elements, what we develop in our mind is equanimity. Not equanimity, not anger, not hatred, not attachment, but equanimity. We see everything is equal. And that is what happened when we see the body exactly as it is. Similarly, feelings. And as Buddha said, the mind is defiled because of thought of pleasantness. Is just a thought. And therefore it doesn't, it is not with, mind doesn't defile, is not defiled without any cause. The cause for defilements is that this is changing from pleasant to unpleasant. And this with regard to the body. The feeling also are the same. A feeling, we sometimes, it is pleasant, we think it is subha, or pleasant feeling is permanent. Anicca Nicca Sanya, and Asubhe Subha Sanya, Anatyata Sanya. Similarly, perception, volition, and consciousness, all these are equally undergoing changes, impermanence. They all are unsatisfactory. They all are without self. Therefore, when one sees them exactly as they are, there is no room in the mind to develop attachment, clinging, craving. And so form is, Buddha said in this discourse, everything, feeling, perceptions, volitions, and consciousness were exclusively suffering, then people will not have any pleasure. If they were exclusively pleasing or pleasurable, then people will never experience any pain. So these are altering situation. Pleasant becomes painful, and painful become pleasurable, and they always go like this in merry-go-round. So the cause and conditions for purification of the mind is seeing them exactly as they are. That is how the purification can happen. Otherwise, there is no way to purify. And therefore, Buddha said to him, if this form were exclusively pleasurable, immersed in pleasure, pain and no pain, then there is no revulsion. Body is always pleasurable, then there is no revulsion. Revulsion means turning away from it. Since it has this, it is true that it is not always pleasurable, it has pain as well. Dominant factor actually in the five aggregate is pain, dominant factor. Others, subordinate factors. That is why the Buddha said five aggregates in short is suffering. Sankittena panchupadanakkhandha dukkha. Sankittena panchupadanakkhandha. He didn't say Sankittena panchupadanakkhandha sukha. He said Sankittena panchupadanakkhandha dukkha. In short, he did not say in short, five aggregates are the pleasure. He said in short, five aggregates are suffering. Therefore, dominating factor, predominant factor in life is suffering. And pleasure is just patch up, band-aid. So we have to, when you remove the band-aid, then you have pain. So you put up a band-aid. How much band-aid can you put all over our body? Our feelings, our perception, our thoughts and consciousness. Not enough band-aid. Not enough band-aid available anywhere. And therefore, we have to cure the wound completely. Once we cure it completely, then we don't need any more band-aid, patch up. How can we do that? We must remove the cause of this wound. That is, understanding it as it is. So, friends, we have to keep in mind, understanding is the number one of the Noble Eightfold Path. The Noble Eightfold Path is karma khaye karma. Karma destroying karma is noble eightfold path. If we keep committing wholesome karmas, unwholesome karmas, and keep committing all the type of karmas again and again, there is no end. Then we keep on lingering and going in samsaric merry-go-round. In order to put a stop to it, we have to practice the Noble Eightfold Path very systematically, diligently. Then we can end this merry-go-round, going in circle. So friends, I think this may be enough for as Dhamma talk, and let us spend a little time in meditation. Hmm?
Sadhu, 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 Bhante.
Okay, let me see. Where is this? Other this go. Hmm. Where is it? Hmm. Okay. Uh, okay, friends. Let us spend some time in meditation. May all beings be happy and secure. May all beings have happy minds. Whatever living beings there may be, without exception, weak or strong, long, large, medium, short, subtle or gross, visible or invisible, living near or far, born or coming to birth, may all beings have happy minds. Let no one deceive another, nor despise anyone anywhere, neither from anger nor ill will should anyone wish harm to another. As a mother would risk her own life to protect her only child, even so towards all living beings, one should cultivate a boundless heart. One should cultivate for all the world a heart of boundless loving friendliness above, below, and all around, unobstructed, without hatred or resentment. Whether standing, walking, sitting, lying down, or whenever awake, one should develop this mindfulness. This is called divinely dwelling here. Not falling into erroneous views, but virtuous and endowed with vision, removing desire for sensual pleasures, one comes never again to birth in the womb. With this metta thought, let us continue our meditation. By means of this meritorious deed, may I never join with the foolish, may I join always with the wise, until the time I attain Bhavana. May the suffering be free from suffering, may the fear-struck be free from fear, may the grieving be free from grief, so too may all beings be. From the highest realm of existence to the lowest, may all beings arisen in these realms, with form and without form, with perception and without perception, be released from all suffering and attain to perfect peace. Excellent, excellent.
Excellent thought. Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you.
Sadhu Bhante, good night.
Sadhu.
Okay.
Sadhu.
Thank you,
Sadhu,
Bhante.
sadhu, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Bhante.
We end this session now.